A fraud and racketeering operation run by Minnesota's government. A brave member of the Minnesota House is connecting the dots and calling on the feds to investigate. Next. State Representative Walter Hudson is my guest, a Republican representing the Albertville area in Minnesota. Thank you again for joining us once again, Representative Hudson. Always good to see you.
Always a pleasure to join you, Liz. Appreciate all the work that you and your colleagues do.
Right back at you. You're a member of the House Fraud Prevention Committee. So in many ways, you've really had a front row seat to the massive amount of fraud and the questionable politics at work with all of this here. You just recently courageously said on social media that you believe there is a racketeering enterprise in Minnesota, one that's been paying people off essentially for their loyalty to the DFL, the Democratic Party of Minnesota. And you're convinced of this?
Yes, I am personally convinced of it, which is a distinction from being able to prove it. I think the necessity to have all the T's crossed and all the I's dotted before raising credible suspicion that that is in fact what's going on is not necessary. We need to apply a certain degree of logic and reason and abide by our lying eyes, right? And recognize that there are certain patterns here that make it very clear that there's something insidious going on.
Just to be clear here about the massive amount of fraud we are talking about, Acting U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson basically said that the entire Minnesota Housing Stabilization Services Program, HSS, is fraud.
The HSS program is riddled with fraud.
He just announced 8 indictments, but said there are about 1,000 investigations related to just HSS alone. Feeding Our Future, another case of fraud that has led to 70 indictments so far. There's also been fraud charges related to autism services, transportation services. You know this well, the list goes on and on. But with more than $1 billion in fraud, that is the total that, again, Acting U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson has mentioned, in all of these government programs, it seems politicians and the media, they try to avoid this common thread. However, you've courageously pointed out that it is basically all of the fraud being perpetuated by members of the Somali community. How does this happen?
Well, that's the question, right? Because it's very, first of all, just to put a point on what you just said, it goes beyond HSS. The current focus is HSS because that's what they're currently prosecuting. But what Thompson said yesterday is that all of our waiver programs are essentially fraud programs. That's how he described them, that they are programs that function to produce fraud. He said that the majority of the dollars that are being taken out of your pocket and applied to this supposedly benevolent purpose are actually going to bad actors who are using our state's benevolence in order to enrich themselves. And so the question becomes, how does that happen? Like, how is it possible? And it's only happening here to the degree that it is happening here in the state of Minnesota. We were the first ones to do this HSS thing. We knew it was experimental. We knew we were coloring outside the box of what had been done in the past. How does this get set up? And then, as Thompson said yesterday, on day one, you've got hundreds of people immediately filing business filings and getting leases where there's a dozen of them in the same building, and they're just all committed to being fake organizations that don't actually do anything for anyone but just build the state. You are asking me to suspend all disbelief, to accept the premise that this is all just one giant coincidence. Just coincidentally. I mean, if I were to go across the street right now and ask a random neighbor, hey, just for research purposes, if you had to right now, without looking it up right now, go and start a business, would you have any idea how to do it? I'm guessing the answer would be no. That's why we have a whole section of the Secretary of State's website showing people how to set up a business. You either already know because you've done it before, you have that institutional knowledge, or somebody has to guide you through the process. And so that's the question that I'm pivoting to at this point is, who guided all of these people through the process of how to make these business filings, how to set up these business structures, how to get these leases, how to set it up? This is a project. How did you go about setting it up? And I will not accept that the answer is no one.
Unlike many others, Representative Hudson, you're not just naming names, you're not just talking about fraud, you're actually trying to do something about it. In fact, you recently called on the United States Attorney General Pam Bondi to take action. You also said she should, which I love this part, buy a second residence and make her career here in Minnesota because she will never run out of people to prosecute. But unfortunately, it seems that everywhere you look, there's fraud. What really needs to happen here to put all of this to an end?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, Thompson made it very clear yesterday in his press conference. He said that we're not going to be able to prosecute our way out of this. I mean, many of his statements that he made yesterday were absolutely stunning. He suggested that he could keep 1,000 prosecutors busy in the state of Minnesota. He has 25, and only 5 of them are dedicated to these fraud cases. So what that indicates to me is that the true level, 2 things. First of all, the true level of the amount of fraud that's going on beneath the surface, it's like an iceberg. We only see the tip of it. We have no idea how deep this thing goes. And number 2 is that injustice will stand. We know that many people who did this to us are never going to face any accountability for it because we lack the prosecutorial resources to make it happen. So it's a little bit like if for some reason you had your hose from outside your house, feeding through a window and it was flooding everything. The first answer to that is not, oh, gee, let me go get a mop. The first answer to that is to turn off the hose. Go to the source, turn off the source of the flooding. The source of the flooding is the state of Minnesota continuing to fund these fraudulent programs. We shut down HSS. The administration felt so much pressure, and I suspect so much concern about what might be discovered if we were able to take a closer look at it, that they decided to shut that program down. Why are any of these programs running right now? After Joe Thompson's press conference yesterday, every single one of these programs should be immediately and indefinitely shut down. That's how you turn off the hose. And then in terms of prosecution, we may not be able to catch everybody, but boy, oh boy, we better be going after the big actors, who I suspect has been coordinating this, has taught them how to do it, provided them with material support, and the political apparatus that has benefited from it. Just objectively, all right, take all my suspicions and just set them aside. Let's say I'm just advocating some paranoid conspiracy and nobody had anything to do with this whatsoever other than the perpetrators. It is unquestionable that the Democrat Party and their candidates have benefited from this fraud. Who do you think these people are voting for? Who do you think they're contributing to in terms of political campaigns? The Democrat Party in the state of Minnesota has benefited directly from this fraud. And whether that was their intention or not, it certainly raises questions that deserve to be deeply investigated, and they're not going to be investigated by anybody with any position of authority in the state of Minnesota because Minnesota is overwhelmingly controlled by Democrats. And so that's why I call upon Pam Bondi and federal authorities to come down here and make Minnesota their vacation home and apply all their resources to rooting this corruption out, pursuing answers to the tough questions, doing a little Sherlock Holmes, and ensuring that even though we're never going to get total accountability, we can at least go after the worst and most insidious actors.
Let's talk about that a bit more, these political connections. These are on record with the Feeding Our Future fraud alone. State Senator Omar Fateh, running now for Minneapolis mayor, connections with the Minneapolis City Council, with council member Jamal Osman. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison met with several people involved, and that recording, it seems, speaks for itself.
And so this has my attention. I'm extremely frustrated by it, but we are in the middle of a battle with the agencies now. And I can tell you this, Walz agrees with me that this piddly, stupid stuff running small people out of business is terrible. But it's the but he knows that there's a lot of unfair, discriminatory stuff going on with East African businesses. I know it.
The Attorney General, telling this group that he would fight state agencies for money on their behalf. And the fact that it's interesting that Ellison never seems to provide comment or be at any of these press conferences. And also, you had something to say about Governor Tim Walz as well, his lack of action with creating a position for oversight, and now sort of doing this in the wake. What is your perspective there on all of these political leaders in Minnesota?
Well, I think Walz and Ellison in particular are definitely worth intense federal scrutiny. Why is it that whenever we see these theatrical actions taken by the Walz administration, it's always in reaction to one of three things? It's either in reaction to a media report that comes out that exposes that this fraud is happening, or it's a reaction to a federally announced prosecution that grabs all the headlines related to all of this fraud, or it's in reaction to us for having the audacity to ask questions and talk about it. Those are the only times when he ever decides this is something I really care about. These are not indications of a good faith actor. And then on Ellison, you've got a guy who, as you pointed out, is on tape meeting with people who were and later convicted defendants in the Defeating Our Future trial, who his abiding concern throughout that recording, never once does he ask about the people being served. Never once does he express concern about the integrity of services. Never once does he say, what are we doing to help folks on the ground? What his concern is, overwhelmingly, and that of the people he's talking to, is keeping them in business, keeping the money flowing. That's a giant red flag.
On a side note, we wanted to ask you about this as it's making news as well, Representative Hudson. The chair of the DFL lying about the horrible assassination of Charlie Kirk, saying that it's a right-wing conservative that's responsible, in a tweet that still remains to this day. We have Ilhan Omar, a sitting U.S. Congresswoman, state senator, all sharing posts on social media blaming Kirk for his own death. So that's the question. Do you think effective representation without compromising public safety is even possible when politicians are making these kinds of statements? You know, has your feeling changed here over the last couple weeks with all that's happened?
Absolutely, unavoidably. Because what has come to light, what we've come to realize by what we've observed over the past week since Kirk's assassination, and more importantly, the response to it from people of status, Congress people, my colleagues in the state legislature, nurses, teachers, professors, people who have some degree or another of a position of influence and stature in our society, who have come out and said, to one degree or another, this guy deserved it. This guy was a bad guy, dancing on his grave. What that tells me is that the social contract has been amended. The social contract, it's not written down anywhere. It's the things that we thought we could take for granted when it comes to how we interact with each other as human beings. One of those things is, I don't want to see you dead. Like, generally speaking, every person should, in their heart of hearts, hold the conviction that they don't want to see other human beings dead. Even in scenarios where the death might be justified, like a police shooting, or a case where the military is taking action, or whatever the case may be, the death that results from that is still a tragedy. And we should all agree with that. We should all agree that human beings should be alive, regardless of what they think. But apparently that clause in our unwritten social contract has just been struck through. It was struck through without our knowledge, and the last week has revealed that there are, in fact, apparently tens of millions of our fellow Americans, our neighbors, walking amongst us, teaching our kids, performing medical procedures on us in hospitals, writing our laws, who don't agree with that, who think that, when some people die, it's a good thing. When some people die, boy, they deserve it, specifically because, not because of what they've done, but because of what they think, because of what they believe, because of the things they say. Past that point, to the heart of your question, it is impossible to maintain an ordered society. I can't sit down across a table from somebody who would celebrate my death, mock my wife, and wish ill on my children. Like, that's a non-starter, right? We're not doing that. And yet that quite literally is the position that I find myself in as a result of being an elected legislator in the state of Minnesota, is that I am now forced to share spaces with, we just elected another one this week, avowed communist who put 8647 on social media. So I got one more I got to deal with. I got to share a space and engage a debate with somebody who thinks the death of their political opponents is on the table.
Scary reality. State Representative Walter Hudson, can't thank you enough for speaking out. Again, you're one of the good guys, one of the brave ones. I hope people will follow you on X. It's at Walter Hudson. But appreciate you taking the time to listen and to speak with Minnesotans. Thank you.
Thank you.
And a reminder, you'll find all our past reports on fraud all in one spot. Just head to alphanews.org. That will do it for this episode of Liz Collin Reports. We'll see you next time.